The universe is not silent. Beneath every heartbeat, beneath the noise of thought, there is a vibration that never stopped resonating, the pulse that sustains existence itself. You've sensed it before, in the stillness between two breaths, in the strange calm that follows truth. Yet the more you try to listen, the more it seems to fade. It isn't distance that hides it, but interference, the static of a mind tuned to survival instead of creation. This frequency is not something to find, but to remember. The path back to it begins in the quiet, where thought dissolves and awareness starts to listen again. The mind is a remarkable instrument, yet it was never meant to be the conductor of reality. It was designed to interpret, translate, categorize, but not to generate the essence that sustains existence. Over time, it began to mistake its own echo for the voice of truth. Thought became so constant, so loud, that silence started to feel like a void instead of a presence. The result is a civilization that speaks endlessly, yet rarely listens, a species that hears everything but the one sound that matters, the pulse that holds all things together. Inside that mental turbulence, the human brain behaves like a radio caught between frequencies. One channel plays the music of intuition, coherence, and inner knowing. The other transmits fear, comparison, and analysis. The mind, trained by linear logic, keeps twisting the dial toward control. It doesn't trust the invisible, so it overthinks the visible. It breaks the infinite continuum of vibration into fragments, beginnings and endings, good and bad, success and failure. In that fragmentation, the signal of creation becomes buried under layers of commentary. This noise is not just mental, it is physiological. Every thought generates a measurable electromagnetic field. Repetitive worries, judgments, and memories form dense currents that wrap around the body like static. The heart tries to emit a steady rhythm, but the brain's incoherence distorts it. You can feel it when tension gathers at the temples, when the breath shortens without reason, when even silence feels full of pressure. The body is only mirroring the static of the mind, broadcasting the frequency of its confusion. Science has begun to map what mystics always described. Brainwave studies show that habitual thinking traps the nervous system in high beta states, the signature of stress and overanalysis. In that mode, perception narrows. The ear becomes selective, attuned to threats and noise instead of harmony. It is not that the universal frequency disappears, it's that your biological receiver shifts out of range. Just as a radio tuned to the wrong band hears nothing but static, consciousness lost in thought can no longer perceive the subtle hum of the field around it. The linear mind is addicted to sequence. First this, then that. It wants to move from cause to effect, from question to answer, from silence to sound. But the frequency that creates everything doesn't follow such logic. It exists outside of time. It is simultaneous, not sequential. To hear it, one must exit the corridor of thought and stand in the open field of awareness, where moments are not lined up but overlapping, where being is more fundamental than doing. It is difficult for the mind to surrender its role as narrator. It fears irrelevance, believing that if it stops commenting it will disappear. Yet when it finally quiets, it discovers something astonishing. Silence does not erase it. It refines it. The mind becomes a clear lens through which consciousness can look, instead of a wall that blocks the view. This is the beginning of attunement, when the thinker starts to serve the listener. You can observe this directly. Close your eyes and watch how fast the next thought arrives. Then notice the brief pause before it comes. In that interval, there is no past and no future. There is only awareness itself. That space is where the frequency lives, not as sound, but as vibration. The more attention you give to that gap, the wider it becomes. Eventually, the noise loses its dominance, and the underlying resonance becomes audible again. What most people call silence is not empty. It is saturated with information too subtle for a distracted mind to decode. Within it, every atom hums with order. The heart's electromagnetic field begins to sync with this rhythm when the mind stops forcing interpretation. The body relaxes, the breath deepens, and the brain waves slow into alpha and theta ranges, states associated with creativity, intuition, and calm. In those frequencies, the static clears. The receiver retunes itself, Linear thought will try to pull you back, whispering that you are wasting time, that nothing is happening. But something profound is happening, the collapse of interference. Every time you observe your own mental noise without engaging it, you reclaim a fragment of coherence. The field begins to align. The static turns into tone. The great paradox is that the frequency that creates everything cannot be heard through effort. Effort tightens the grip of the analytical mind, amplifying the very noise you are trying to escape. The key is not to suppress thinking, but to soften attention, to listen beneath it. Just as a musician learns to feel the vibration before playing a note, you learn to sense the hum beneath thought before interpreting it. Gradually, perception shifts. Sounds in your environment seem richer, as if carrying hidden harmonics. Ordinary moments, the hum of a refrigerator, the rustle of leaves, reveal an underlying unity. The noise of the mind hasn't vanished, but it no longer commands the stage. It becomes part of the orchestra instead of the conductor. And in that reordering, a subtle realization dawns. The frequency was never lost. It was simply drowned out by the mind's need to explain. Once the commentary fades, the music of existence resurfaces, precise and infinite, waiting to be heard not by the ears, but by awareness itself. Between two thoughts lies a stillness that few ever notice. It is not the absence of mind, but the origin of it, the blank canvas upon which thought briefly appears and then fades. Most people live in the surge and crash of those mental waves, mistaking the movement for life itself. Yet the power that animates thought does not reside in the words or images. It resides in the silent space between them. That interval is not empty. It is the gateway to the field that vibrates beneath reality. Imagine standing at the edge of an ocean before dawn. The water moves, but there are moments when it pauses, suspended between the pull and release of the tide. In that pause, something becomes audible, a low hum that seems to come from the water and from within you at once. This is what happens inside the mind when you begin to observe its rhythm instead of riding it. Each thought is a wave, and between the waves there is a moment of suspension where the true frequency can be felt. When awareness begins to notice that space, it experiences a reversal. The mind, once the narrator, becomes the observed. You begin to see thought not as who you are, but as a transient event, a ripple passing through consciousness. In that shift, a sense of depth opens. You realize that the silence between thoughts is more real than the thoughts themselves, for it remains unchanged while they come and go. Modern neuroscience offers a glimpse into this mystery. During deep meditation, brain activity shows brief micro-pauses between neural bursts. These moments correlate with an increase in gamma coherence, a state of synchronized firing across distant regions of the brain. It is as if the nervous system, freed from its habitual chatter, suddenly harmonizes into one unified note. From that coherence, perception expands. Time slows. A faint sense of wholeness replaces the usual fragmentation of attention. But the discovery is not merely scientific, it is experiential. If you sit quietly and let attention rest on the breath, you may notice how thought rises like foam on the surface of awareness. When it subsides, there is a moment of profound quiet. It doesn't last long because the mind rushes to fill it with the next word or image. Yet even a single glimpse is enough to reveal that silence is not passive. It vibrates. It feels alive, almost audible, a tone without pitch, a sound that cannot be heard by the ear but recognized by the whole body. That sensation is the beginning of reattunement. The field of creation, the frequency that sustains all forms, can only be perceived when awareness is steady enough to rest in that interval. The moment you chase it, it vanishes. The moment you allow it, it reveals itself. This paradox confuses the linear mind, but the deeper self understands it instinctively. Silence is not something you create. It is what remains when you stop creating noise. In ancient traditions, this pause between thoughts was regarded as sacred. Yogic texts called it the sandhi, the juncture where the finite meets the infinite. Zen masters described it as the space between the drum beats where the true rhythm lives. Modern physics might call it the quantum vacuum, the sea of potential that exists even when matter seems absent. Different languages, same truth. The creative frequency emerges not from motion, but from stillness pregnant with possibility. As you start to rest more often in that space, perception changes subtly but unmistakably. Sounds become clearer, colors sharper, emotions less sticky. You are no longer fully immersed in the narrative stream. You are aware of the river itself. Thoughts still happen, but they pass like clouds instead of storms. This is not detachment, it is coherence. The observer in you begins to vibrate in phase with the field that generates experience. It can feel disorienting at first, as though identity is dissolving. That is because the old self was built entirely from thought patterns, the waves. When those waves calm, the sense of I that depended on their motion begins to quiet as well. Yet something larger remains, a witnessing presence untouched by the flux. That presence is the listener of the frequency, the silent awareness that both contains and transcends the mind. The practice is deceptively simple. Become intimate with the pause. In daily life, notice the micro gaps, the instant before you answer a question, the breath between sentences, the fraction of a second when your eyes blink. In those slivers of quiet, the universal vibration leaks through. The more you rest there, the more the gap expands, until silence becomes a living background that accompanies every action. As this awareness stabilizes, the distinction between inner and outer begins to blur. The hum you sense within is mirrored in the rustle of leaves, the rhythm of footsteps, the pulse of distant machinery. Everything seems to participate in a single symphony, each sound emerging from the same silence. The world no longer feels like a collection of separate objects, but as patterns of resonance, dancing in and out of the field. Eventually, you realize that the interval between mental waves is not something to visit. It is where you have always been. Thought arises within it like sparks in a vast sky, but the sky itself never moves. To live from that recognition is to live in coherence with the frequency that creates everything. You still think, speak, and act, but now each movement emerges from silence rather than resisting it. The music of existence begins to flow through you instead of being filtered by you. When the observer learns to listen to the pause, creation itself becomes audible, not as sound, but as presence. The hum beneath reality reveals its constancy, reminding you that silence was never the absence of life, but its deepest expression. You were never meant to silence the mind completely, only to discover the still point within its motion. That is where the true listening begins, in the quiet breath between one thought and the next, where the frequency of all things waits patiently to be remembered. Reality is not made of matter as much as it is made of rhythm. Beneath the solidity of every object, the stillness of every void, and the apparent chaos of every storm lies vibration, organized movement within a field of infinite potential. What we call the world is a concert of frequencies constantly weaving themselves into patterns of form and experience. Science, when it dares to listen closely enough, begins to hear what mysticism has sung for millennia. Everything is sound. Everything is resonance. Quantum physics revealed a century ago that the smallest building blocks of the universe are not particles in the traditional sense, but energy fluctuations within a field. Each so-called particle behaves more like a standing wave, appearing and disappearing depending on the observer's interaction. The old mechanical universe, composed of separate solid pieces, has given way to a universe of relations, of harmonics playing upon the strings of an invisible fabric. The equations that describe it read like musical notation written in the language of mathematics. Amplitude, frequency, phase, interference. Every atom emits a vibration, and when clusters of atoms align, their oscillations create larger, slower waves that we perceive as tangible matter. The table, the skin of your hand, the light filtering through the window, all are manifestations of frequency stabilized long enough for consciousness to interpret them. The sound field is not metaphor, it is literal. In laboratories, scientists can record the resonant signature of molecules and even of human cells. Each structure hums according to its internal geometry. Life, at every scale, is a form of acoustic coherence. Yet there is another dimension that modern instruments only begin to approach, the role of observation. The act of attention alters the field. When you observe a particle, you change its behavior. It collapses from potential into a specific state. This is the observer effect, one of the most mysterious and challenging discoveries of modern science. But beneath the equations lies a profound implication. Consciousness is not outside the universe, it participates in its music. Awareness is not a spectator, but a conductor whose focus organizes the waves of possibility into the melody of experience. Think of consciousness as an invisible tuning fork. When it vibrates coherently, free from inner noise and contradiction, it brings the surrounding field into resonance. When it vibrates incoherently, filled with fragmented thought and emotion, it scatters the harmony. The difference between chaos and order, between distortion and clarity, is not in the field itself, but in the quality of the listener. The universe does not impose form, it responds to tone. In biophysics, researchers studying the heart's electromagnetic field have discovered that coherence in its rhythm produces measurable effects throughout the body. The heart's signal influences brain waves, hormonal balance, and even cellular communication. When emotion stabilizes into gratitude or calm, the heart emits a smooth waveform that entrains other systems into harmony. This physiological coherence mirrors what occurs on a quantum level. Resonance leading to order. The body is not separate from the field. It is a microcosm of it, an instrument designed to play in tune with creation. Sound, in this sense, is more than vibration through air. It is the principle of relationship, the meeting point where energy becomes perceivable. Just as musical notes arise from specific ratios between frequencies, the structures of nature emerge from mathematical harmonics. The spiral of a shell, the orbit of planets, even the arrangement of DNA follow resonant proportions. Each layer of reality echoes the same underlying score, scaled to its octave. The ancients spoke of this as the music of the spheres, and though their language was poetic, their intuition was precise. When consciousness recognizes itself as part of that universal symphony, perception shifts from isolation to participation. You are no longer listening to the universe. You are listening as the universe. The sound field passes through you, modulated by your attention, amplified by your emotion. Every decision, every perception, every subtle thought becomes a stroke in the composition. This realization does not inflate the ego, it dissolves it. For you see that even the smallest act of awareness contributes to the harmony or dissonance of the whole. In laboratories exploring cymatics, the study of visible sound patterns, a single tone projected onto sand or water organizes chaos into precise geometry. Change the frequency, and the pattern transforms instantly. The universe behaves the same way. When consciousness shifts vibration, the geometry of experience rearranges. Relationships alter, opportunities appear, and matter reconfigures to match the new resonance. What we call synchronicity may simply be harmonic alignment between inner and outer frequencies. The heart, then, is not just a biological pump, but a bridge between the measurable and the ineffable. It listens in wavelengths the brain cannot detect. When coherent, it acts as an antenna that translates the quantum hum of creation into felt experience, intuition, insight, peace. You do not need to imagine this as mystical. It is the most natural state of physics meeting awareness. The so-called quantum sound field is nothing more than consciousness recognizing its own echo in matter. To approach this experientially, consider moments when beauty silences you, the instant before tears, the pause between two notes of a song that moves you. In that suspension, analysis vanishes, and something larger listens through you. That presence is the field sensing itself. The emotion you feel is coherence, the brief alignment of your vibration with the fundamental tone of existence. As science and consciousness begin to converge, a new form of understanding emerges, one that neither worships mystery nor denies it. The sound field is not an object to be measured, nor a fantasy to be believed. It is a reality to be experienced directly. When awareness steadies into coherence, perception becomes musical, and the boundaries between physics and spirit dissolve. The universe continues to sing, and every atom, every thought, every heartbeat contributes a note to its endless, self-creating song. At the center of all interference stands a familiar figure, the self, not the living awareness that breathes and perceives, but the mental construct that claims authorship over every pulse of existence. It insists, I am the one who thinks, chooses, controls. This sense of self, built from memory and comparison, believes it must manage the vibration of life. But in its constant attempt to manipulate, it becomes the very distortion it fears. The frequency that creates everything is perfect resonance. The ego is the static that tries to control it. The ego emerged from necessity. In the physical world, identity helps you navigate form, make decisions, and survive. But somewhere along the path, the tool became the ruler. The voice that should translate consciousness began to speak for it, turning the open field of awareness into a confined room filled with mirrors. Each mirror reflects a fragment, what others think, what might happen, what already happened, what should be different. Within this echo chamber, the sound of creation becomes muffled under layers of commentary. This I tries to tune itself to the universe but cannot, because it is not a stable instrument. It shifts tone with every emotion, every judgment, every fear. One day it sings of worthiness, the next of lack. It wants to harmonize with the whole, but insists on remaining the soloist. Its very existence depends on separation, a distance from the field it secretly longs to join, so it continues to hum off-key, believing that with enough effort it can master the song. But the field does not respond to effort, it responds to coherence. The ego's vibration is restless, fragmented by desire and resistance. Every I want and I must is a ripple that distorts the signal. The more it pushes, the more the interference amplifies. This is why control never produces peace. The mind can organize, analyze, predict, but it cannot align the frequency of being. Alignment requires surrender, not dominance. The interference of self is easy to observe in daily life. Consider the moment you try to meditate. The intention is pure, to become still. Yet within seconds, the inner voice begins narrating, planning, evaluating, commenting on how well or poorly you are doing. The very act of trying to silence thought becomes another thought. The ego has disguised itself as the seeker of silence. In that instant, the tuning is lost again, for you cannot hear the field while you are busy listening to your own performance. To understand how deeply this interference runs, look at how the brain maps selfhood. Neuroscientists studying the default mode network, the set of brain regions active during self-referential thinking, found that its overactivity correlates with rumination, anxiety, and even depression. When this network quiets, as in meditation or flow states, people report a loss of boundaries, a sense of unity, and heightened clarity. The data suggest what mystics have always known. The self as story is the veil between the listener and the music. When the story softens, the melody returns. Letting go of that story is not destruction, it is recalibration. Imagine the ego as a musician who believes they are playing solo, unaware they're part of an orchestra. When they stop forcing their rhythm and begin to listen, they discover the tempo that was always guiding them. Their playing becomes effortless, synchronized with the ensemble. The same happens within consciousness. Once the self loosens its grip, awareness starts resonating with the broader field naturally. In that resonance, something extraordinary occurs, a sense of humility that is not weakness, but recognition. You realize that you are not the source of the music, you are one of its instruments. The sound plays through you, shaping thought, emotion, and action with precision. The ego resists this truth because it values authorship more than harmony. Yet the moment it allows itself to be played, it experiences the freedom it always sought. This surrender is not passivity. It is the most dynamic state possible because it aligns your vibration with the creative current of the universe. In that alignment, action arises spontaneously, guided by coherence rather than calculation. The body moves with purpose. The voice speaks truth without rehearsal. Intuition replaces strategy. You no longer push against the current of life. You flow as part of it. The interference of self also manifests in relationships. Each time you defend, compare, or seek validation, the signal wobbles. The need to be right or superior pulls you out of tune with others. For harmony cannot exist where hierarchy dominates. When the mind stops defending the image of self, it begins to perceive others not as opponents or mirrors, but as extensions of the same frequency. Communication then transforms from exchange to resonance. Words become secondary to presence. You can witness the ego's dissonance even in the body. When thought clings to control, the muscles tighten, breath shortens, and the heartbeat quickens. The nervous system mirrors the mental static. As soon as awareness releases the need to fix or prove, the body realigns. The breath deepens, the shoulders drop. The heart's rhythm smooths into coherence. Physiology follows consciousness. The instrument tunes itself once the noise subsides. The irony is that the self spends a lifetime seeking the divine sound, not realizing it is the one dampening the strings. Every spiritual path at its core is a refinement of listening, the gradual dissolution of interference until only music remains. The silence of awakening is not the absence of personality. It is personality becoming transparent to the field that sustains it. The self still exists, but as melody rather than barrier. When you recognize that the true I is not the thinker but the listener behind the thought, something within you unclenches. The mind continues to function, but its noise no longer defines the experience. The static fades into the background, and what emerges is astonishingly familiar, a vibration so intimate that it feels like home. The frequency that creates everything has been sounding all along, waiting for the self to step aside and let the music be heard again. Emotion is not a reaction, it is a vibration in motion. Beneath every feeling lies a waveform, a measurable pulse that ripples through the body and extends far beyond it. This is the true language of frequency, one that cannot be spoken but only felt. Words translate thought, vibration translates being. When emotion and awareness merge, a silent syntax forms between you and the universe, and communication occurs without speech. Each emotion carries its own resonance. Fear contracts, speeding the rhythm of the heart and scattering the body's electromagnetic field. Gratitude expands, stabilizing the same field into smooth coherence. The difference is not abstract, it can be measured. Scientists observing heart-brain synchronization found that when a person feels appreciation or love, their heart rhythm produces a sine wave pattern that aligns the brain's oscillations. The entire system begins to function as one instrument. The result is clarity, intuition, and physical balance, not as miracles but as consequences of alignment. Ancient traditions intuited this truth long before it was charted. They described emotion as the bridge between the visible and the invisible, the translator between spirit and form. Joy was not just happiness, it was resonance with the creative pulse. Grief was not failure, it was the sound of love adjusting its pitch after loss. Every emotion served a purpose within the great spectrum of vibration, shaping the human experience as music shapes silence. But modern culture has forgotten how to listen. We treat emotion as data to be suppressed or justified instead of as messages from the field. When anger rises, we analyze it instead of feeling its frequency. When sadness arrives, we rush to fix it rather than attune to its rhythm. This resistance creates dissonance, like striking mismatched notes on an instrument. The more we fight what we feel, the more distortion we generate. Emotion unacknowledged becomes static. Emotion felt with presence becomes sound, transformed into harmony. To reconnect with the language of frequency, one must learn to feel without narrative. It begins simply. Awareness meets sensation without labeling it as good or bad. The heat of anger, the weight of sorrow, the lightness of peace, all are vibrations asking to be heard. When you listen this way, emotion completes its natural cycle instead of looping endlessly through the mind. The energy moves through, and what remains is clarity, a tone of coherence that the body recognizes as truth. The heart is the translator of this inner language. Unlike the brain, which dissects, the heart perceives holistically. It feels patterns as wholes, not as fragments. When attention drops from the head into the chest, perception widens. You begin to sense not only your own emotions, but also the subtle resonance of others, of environments, of events before they occur. This sensitivity, is not imagination. It is the return of the natural capacity to read the field through vibration. In this state, thinking becomes secondary. Intuition rises as direct knowing bypassing analysis. A decision once clouded by doubt suddenly feels obvious, not because logic proved it, but because the body vibrates yes. The more consistently you live in emotional coherence, the more reality itself seems to respond. Circumstances align, timing improves, people appear at the right moment. It is not magic. It is resonance attracting resonance. You have begun to speak the universe's first language. The paradox is that the more fluent you become in this language, the less you need to speak at all. Presence communicates more effectively than words. A coherent person alters a room without trying. Their calm stabilizes others, their clarity invites truth. This is the physics of compassion, the measurable influence of coherence radiating outward like sound waves. Gratitude is the clearest dialect of this universal tongue. It is both the simplest and the most transformative vibration. To feel genuine gratitude is to align your inner frequency with creation itself. You stop asking life to change its tone and start harmonizing with it. In that moment, the gap between you and the field closes. You become the music rather than the listener. If you felt that subtle shift while reading, a soft expansion in the chest, a slowing of the breath, that is coherence beginning to form. Stay there for a moment. Let the words fade and notice the vibration beneath them. That's the real message, the rest is translation. And now, let's amplify it together. If this exploration resonated with you, pause for a second, breathe into your heart, and write one word in the comments. The emotion you want to vibrate more often in your life. It could be peace, clarity, freedom, or love. As you type it, feel that frequency within you. Let the act itself become a note added to the shared field we're creating. Then simply listen. The universe will answer in the same tone you send. The brain is not the source of consciousness, it is the instrument through which consciousness becomes perceivable. Like an antenna tuned to invisible frequencies, it translates vibration into thought, image, and meaning. Most people believe they think reality into being, but in truth, they are receiving it, decoding a constant flow of information from the quantum field that surrounds and permeates everything. The clarity of that reception depends entirely on the tuning of the instrument. Within its billions of neurons, the brain generates an orchestra of electrical rhythms. These brainwaves, delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma, are not mere byproducts of thought. They are the signatures of states of consciousness, each representing a specific mode of connection with the field. When the rhythms fall into coherence, the brain becomes a refined receiver, capable of translating subtle, non-local data into awareness. When they fragment under stress or distraction, the signal distorts, and perception narrows to survival. Modern neuroscience has begun to glimpse this mystery. In deep meditation, advanced practitioners show surges of high-frequency gamma waves that synchronize across vast regions of the brain. This coherence is unlike ordinary thinking. It's as if the entire neural network hums in a unified tone. Participants describe these moments as profound silence or boundless connection, not because the mind ceases, but because it aligns. The brain, freed from the grip of linear thought, begins to mirror the harmonic structure of the universe itself. Consider the difference between a storm of random static and a clear radio signal. Both involve energy, but only one carries meaning. In daily life, the analytical mind floods the brain with static, evaluation, prediction, control. Each mental fragment competes for dominance, creating interference. The signal from the field still arrives, but its clarity is lost in the noise. Intuition becomes faint, insight delayed, and creativity reduced to repetition. Yet when the mind quiets and awareness spreads evenly through the body, the neural storm subsides. The receiver clears. The message, long buried under interference, begins to emerge. The brain's architecture is uniquely suited for this translation. The pineal gland, often called the seat of the soul, functions like a biological crystal. It responds to electromagnetic frequencies and secretes neurochemicals that modulate perception. When the body enters states of deep coherence, through slow breathing, focused attention, and emotional stability. The pineal gland activates in ways that bridge the physical and the non-physical. People report luminous sensations, vivid inner imagery, or profound intuition. These are not hallucinations but translations, the brain's way of rendering the field into sensory language. Meanwhile, the hemispheres of the brain play complementary roles in decoding the field. The left hemisphere analyzes, categorizes, and orders the flow into language and logic. The right hemisphere perceives patterns, tone, and emotional resonance. When they operate out of sync, perception becomes fragmented. When they harmonize, a larger intelligence emerges, one that integrates reason and intuition. This bilateral coherence is the neurological reflection of unity consciousness, the inner balance that allows the universal frequency to be clearly perceived. Even in ordinary waking life, moments of heightened creativity or spontaneous knowing reveal the antenna's potential. You might sense a decision before reasoning it out, or feel someone's mood without a word being spoken. These are glimpses of non-local communication, resonance through the field beyond physical contact. The more coherent your neural and emotional states, the more accessible these insights become. Intuition ceases to be mysterious. It becomes another sense, one that perceives frequency rather than form. The implication is both humbling and empowering. The brain is not a generator of awareness, but a translator of it. Consciousness precedes biology. What appears as thought is simply vibration slowed down until it becomes audible to the self. In this view, the mind is not inside the skull is inside the mind. The field extends far beyond the body, and the brain, like a finely tuned receiver, focuses that immensity into usable experience. When this understanding deepens, life itself begins to feel different. The world no longer seems random. It feels responsive. Coincidences appear as signals, not accidents. A subtle dialogue unfolds between your inner state and the outer environment, each reflecting the other. The more coherent the antenna, the more aligned thought, emotion, and physiology become, the clearer this dialogue sounds. The universe, once silent, begins to communicate through everything. Ultimately, the brain's purpose is not to dominate consciousness, but to refine it. It allows the infinite to experience itself through finite perception. When properly tuned, it becomes transparent, no longer an obstacle between awareness and the field, but a bridge. And through that bridge, the vibration that creates everything begins to speak in the language of insight, timing, and revelation, not as something extraordinary, but as the natural hum of a universe finally heard through a mind that has learned to listen. To hear the frequency that creates everything, you do not need to build something new. You need to unlearn the interference that has hidden it. The human system, mind, body, and emotion, is not broken. It is misaligned. Like a finely crafted instrument left untuned for too long, it still holds the potential for perfect sound, but its strings vibrate at conflicting tensions. Vibrational reprogramming is not about adding anything. It is about remembering harmony. Every vibration in the body begins with rhythm, the pulse of the breath, the beat of the heart, the subtle oscillation of the cells. When these rhythms fall out of sync with one another, the system becomes noisy. You may still appear functional, but internally coherence fragments. The first step toward correction is recognition. You cannot retune an instrument while pretending it already plays in tune. Awareness of dissonance is the beginning of healing. Breath is the most direct bridge between consciousness and vibration. Each inhale draws energy into the system. Each exhale releases resistance. When breathing becomes shallow or irregular, the nervous system interprets danger, even in safety. The field around the heart contracts, the mind tightens, and perception narrows. Reprogramming begins when you consciously stabilize this rhythm, not through forced control, but through gentle consistency. Slow, even breathing signals to the body that it is safe to realign. The heart begins to emit a coherent waveform, which in turn synchronizes brain activity. Coherence cascades through the entire system, re-establishing the frequency of calm. Attention is the second element. Most people live with attention scattered across countless worries and projections. Energy follows attention. What you focus on amplifies. A fragmented focus weakens the signal, while sustained awareness strengthens it. When attention returns to the present moment, to the direct experience of being, the energy that was dispersed begins to consolidate. The field stabilizes, allowing the body's internal rhythms to harmonize with the larger quantum field. This is not mystical, it is measurable. Coherent attention reorganizes both neural and electromagnetic activity, transforming chaos into pattern. The third pillar is emotional coherence. Emotions are not obstacles to clarity, they are frequencies guiding you toward it. Gratitude, compassion, and joy are not just pleasant states, they are tuning mechanisms. When genuinely felt, they restructure the field of the heart and brain, aligning their oscillations with the resonance of the unified field. Gratitude in particular acts as a master frequency, softening resistance and opening the system to higher order. It is not a mental exercise, but a physiological event, a recalibration of the body's electromagnetic language. These three harmonics, breath, attention, emotion, form the foundation of vibrational reprogramming. They work together like the triad of tones that establish a musical key. When they resonate, the human organism becomes transparent to the frequency of creation. The separation between inner and outer dissolves, replaced by a dynamic equilibrium in which life flows through you rather than against you. Yet reprogramming is not a single event. It is a process of remembering. The mind, conditioned by years of reaction, will attempt to reclaim control. It will analyze the experience, reduce it to technique, and in doing so recreate the same static it sought to remove. The correction cannot come from thought alone, because thought itself is part of the distortion. Realignment happens through consistent presence, through feeling, sensing, allowing. When awareness rests without trying to fix, the natural intelligence of the body and the field begins to restore harmony. You may notice subtle signs as coherence returns. Time feels slower, colors appear brighter, communication becomes smoother, coincidences align with intention. These are not miracles but feedback, the universe showing that your signal is clearing. The external begins to mirror the internal state of order. The more stable your coherence, the more life seems to organize around it. It is tempting to imagine this process as ascending to a higher plane, but the correction is not upward, it is inward. The frequency that creates everything does not exist above you, but within you, beneath the layers of mental noise and emotional contraction. It was never lost, only obscured. When breath steadies, attention focuses, and emotion harmonizes, the static fades, revealing the original tone that has always been there. Ultimately, vibrational reprogramming is not an act of control, but of remembrance. You are not manufacturing a new state. You are returning to your native resonance, the one that preceded thought and identity. As the body entrains to the heart, and the heart entrains to the field, a new order emerges. Quiet, precise, and alive. The correction feels less like achievement and more like recognition. The sound you sought outside has been resonating within all along. When coherence deepens, the distinction between practice and life disappears. Every breath becomes an act of tuning. Every perception becomes part of the music. You no longer strive to hear the frequency that creates everything. You live as it, moving through the world in harmonic dialogue with the same force that shapes stars and cells alike. The correction, then, is not something you do. It is the realization that nothing was ever wrong, only out of tune, waiting for your awareness to remember the key. When personal vibration comes into phase with the vibration of the whole, something subtle but irreversible occurs. The sense of being a separate observer begins to dissolve, and what remains is participation, the realization that the universe is not a collection of objects, but a continuous field of resonance. Every atom, every breath, every thought is a tone within the same vast composition. What you once called the world around you reveals itself as the echo of your own frequency, reflected back through infinite layers of harmony. This unity is not philosophical. It is experiential. When coherence stabilizes, perception shifts from fragmentation to rhythm. The mind stops dividing sound into me and it. What used to feel external becomes inclusive. The wind through the trees is not outside. It is part of your own vibration extending into form. The pulse of the ocean, the hum of machines, the voice of another person, all are expressions of one continuous waveform passing through different densities of matter. The separation was never real. It was a distortion created by a mind interpreting life rather than listening to it. Physics whispers the same story through its equations. At the quantum level, nothing exists in isolation. Particles are entangled across distances, sharing information instantaneously, as if space were an illusion. Each event in the universe affects the rest, not through mechanical transmission, but through resonance within a unified field. When consciousness becomes coherent with that field, synchronicities multiply. Life appears to answer you before you even speak, because you are no longer sending signals outward, you are part of the signal itself. In this state, awareness begins to perceive the music beneath form. You might notice that silence itself vibrates, that every pause between sounds carries texture and presence. The heartbeat seems to blend with the rhythm of the world. Movement and stillness become one gesture. The universe no longer feels like a stage upon which you act, but as an instrument playing itself through your awareness. Existence becomes symphonic, countless notes, infinite tempos, but one sound. Mystics across cultures describe this moment as awakening, union, or enlightenment. Yet it is less a grand event and more a homecoming. The sound that animates galaxies is the same that animates you. When personal and cosmic frequencies align, the concept of inside and outside loses meaning. The boundaries of skin, thought, and identity blur into the continuity of vibration. You are both the note and the listener, the echo and the origin. This state of unity does not remove individuality. It refines it. The self becomes transparent rather than absent, allowing the universal current to flow through without distortion. Creativity amplifies, compassion deepens, and fear diminishes because you no longer perceive life as something that can be lost. The universe breathes through you, and what you call your life is simply one verse in its endless song. Even ordinary moments reveal the same principle. When you walk through a crowded city and feel a sudden stillness inside, you may sense the pulse that connects all movement. The traffic, voices, and footsteps are not chaos. They are layers of rhythm forming a larger pattern. When you sit by water and feel peace arise without cause, you are aligning with the ancient frequency that shaped the tides. The unity of sound is everywhere, waiting for awareness to recognize itself in it. Science and spirituality converge here, not in language but in essence. Both point toward coherence as the signature of life. Where coherence exists, energy flows freely. Where it breaks, decay begins. The same pattern governs atoms, ecosystems, and consciousness. The health of a body, a society, or a planet depends on resonance among its parts. When harmony returns, balance follows naturally. The universe self-corrects through sound. As awareness rests in this realization, even silence changes quality. It no longer feels like emptiness, but as fullness too vast for noise. Each moment pulses with quiet intelligence, as if existence is humming a single infinite tone that carries every possible melody within it. That tone is not heard with the ears, but felt through presence. It is the same vibration that ancient mystics called Om, the same energy that scientists call the zero-point field, the same heartbeat that whispers within your chest. To live in unity with that sound is to live without resistance. You move through the world with the grace of a note perfectly placed within its chord, necessary, harmonious, and free. Decisions arise naturally, guided by resonance rather than analysis. Compassion becomes instinctive because every being is recognized as another expression of the same tone. The struggle to connect ends, for connection was never lost. It was only obscured by the noise of separation. In the stillness that follows this recognition, everything sings. The stone beneath your feet hums the same frequency as the stars overhead. The breath entering your lungs is part of a cosmic exhalation that began before time. You do not listen to the universe anymore. The universe listens through you. The sound of creation has never ceased. It continues as your very being, vibrating eternally in perfect, silent harmony. The secret was never hidden, only forgotten beneath the static of thought. The frequency that creates everything has always been here, vibrating through silence, breath, and awareness itself. You do not need to search for it. You only need to listen differently. When the mind quiets and the heart becomes coherent, the sound of creation reveals itself not as something outside you, but as what you are. The universe has been singing through your every heartbeat, waiting for you to remember its rhythm. If you felt this resonance and stayed until now, write the word listening in the comments, so I know you reached the end. And if you want more journeys like this, subscribe and stay tuned for the next vibration we'll explore together.